Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a video about flashing a controller, what that means, and basically just how to get a keyboard that you've built from scratch up and running and what all you need to do. So just a very short explanation of what flashing a keyboard is. You may have heard that term before. Basically, it's a process that you need to do for your keyboard, specifically for the microcontroller, kind of the brains part of the keyboard. You need to do for that to take it from this blank slate that's just a factory-made microcontroller, like an Elite C controller. You need to transform that into something that's going to recognize that when you press the D key on your keyboard, that it's going to then type that onto your computer. So when you get these microcontrollers from the factory, they're basically just a blank slate. So you need to put software onto them that will allow your mechanical movements to be translated into keystrokes or symbols or whatever you program your computer or your keyboard to do. So today we're going to go over the process of how exactly you do that. I'm making this video because I feel like there really weren't a lot of good videos, either on Reddit, on YouTube, any other sites that I could find. So it took me like 6 or 8 hours to scour all those sites and find all the directions to do this and find out where to go and the links for everything I needed. So hopefully this video will make that process much easier and just kind of get everything under one roof here as far as instructions go for doing that. So that's the purpose of this video. Let's get into how to do it. So I will provide links for all the sites that I use and everything in the video description below, so go look for those. I'm also going to have all those in that one place for you. So this is an article from Keybs for All on how to flash your PCB or keyboard with QMK, which is the software that we'll be using. So basically this process of flashing is just downloading software from your computer onto the microcontroller. But there's a few applications you need to download to do it, and there's a bit of a specific process to follow so that you don't brick your microcontroller. So here's how we're going to do this. This is basically an article that covers it in detail, but there's some things that I found aren't covered in this article, so I'm going to make sure to cover those as well. Specifically, the keyboard that I built is an ergonomic split keyboard called the ferris-sweep. So it has two halves, and for a keyboard like that, you have to flash them separately, but we'll get into that a little bit later. This article is basically just a base point for you. It's got a lot of good details, reading up just about what the process really is, if you want to do that a little bit more in detail. But let's just get into how to actually do it. I'm more or less going to be following this guide, but like I said, just going through in more detail, exactly where to download stuff from and all of that. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is download the QMK toolbox. So like I said, QMK is the software that we're going to use to get this software from your computer onto your keyboard. So you need to go to this QMK toolbox, which I'll link in the description. Go to the code button here, and then download this zip file, and then open the zip file and run it. So that's going to download this app onto your computer called QMK Toolbox, which allows you to flash flash your keyboard using the QMK software. So next we need to go build this software, which definitely sounds way harder than it actually is. QMK actually makes this really seamless, really easy. I was a complete beginner to this process, and after I figured out what it was, I didn't have many problems with it. So I will link this webpage for the QMK configurator here. So there's a link right here, QMK configurator. Click that link and it will take you here to the configurator. So this is what's going to make the software, basically create the file for the software that you need to download onto your keyboard. Pretty easy to do. Basically just go to your keyboard. So click here, type in whatever keyboard you have. Mine that I built was the ferris-sweep. There should be repositories for like every type of custom keyboard in here. It'll automatically select the layout for you that the ferris-sweep has, which is this one down below. If you have a different keyboard, just type in a different one. It will give you a different layout of keys. So here it's got the layout shown, and then I just typed in, a key map name. This will just help you keep your file name straight later if you come up with multiple. And then this is just some code here. And here's what really matters. This is your key map layout. So this is what you're going to use to design the actual key map for your keyboard. So the great part, of building a custom keyboard is you can program any of your keys to whatever letter, symbol, anything that you want it to do. And this is just like the color coordinator here, so you can change the color. It doesn't really do much, but here is what this means. Here's kind of how to interpret this key map. So these big letters on here obviously will show, your key map for what will happen if you type, if you download this file, put it onto your keyboard, this is what they will type. If you want to change something, you just click on it. For some reason, if I wanted to change this G to, a space bar or something weird, it just changes it on there. So you can go click around, change around the letters if you want to, play around with it. This will come in handy, at least for me it did. A few weeks after using the keyboard, I was like, oh, I want, double spaces on this side, which aren't default, or maybe I want, this backspace to be a space and this to be a backspace, switch them up. You can do whatever. The kind of hard to interpret part, which took me a little bit to figure out, is these layers. So this says layer 2 on this button. So the main function of this button, if you download this key map, is going to be K. You press the button, it gives you a K. But if you hold this button down, it will use the layer 2 function. So this brings up the layer subject on your keyboard. So we're currently on layer 0. If you just download this and you just type mindlessly on your keyboard, this is what you're going to be typing. These big letters are. But another great thing about custom keyboards, you can layer them, especially split ones. So this comes in especially handy when you only have 34 keys on a build like the ferris-sweep. So this says layer 2. If you were to hold this button on the keyboard after flashing this file onto it, it will then bring you to the second layer. So it'll transform your keyboard function-wise into the keys that you see now here on layer 2. The layers are listed over here on the side. So if I were to hold down this button on the keyboard and then press this button over here that my cursor is moving on, instead of typing a D, because I'm holding down the layer 2, it will now type a down arrow, or it'll use the down arrow function. So that's basically how this layering system works and the key mapping system works. So you can go in, play around with that, change it if you want to. And then what you're going to do, once you're all satisfied with that, is come up here and press compile. I'm not going to do it here, but just do it. It'll give you a potato loading screen and say it's compiling the file. And then after a few minutes, when it does that, this firmware button will change to green. You can click it, download the firmware. It will download into a hex file, which just means when it goes onto your download bar down here or wherever, it's just a file name and then .hex. If it's not .hex, you probably have a problem with that file. So .hex is what you need. Now, next thing we're going to talk about is setting your microcontroller and your keyboard into what's called DFU mode. That's like the another word for it is bootloader mode, factory reset mode, whatever. It basically just turns your microcontroller, so your Elite C or your Pro Micro, your Nice Nano or whatever, it just wipes it. So it wipes it clean slate, ready to flash with a new software, which just means move that new software onto there. So I used Elite C controllers for my build. And how you do this with an Elite C controller, if you've soldered on a reset button onto your keyboard, you can go ahead and use that to reset it, to put it into DFU mode. But if you haven't, you have to reset it manually. This took me a while to figure out, but it's actually really easy. You just get a paper clip or something else metal that has two ends to it, and you touch the GND, this ground pin right here, which my cursor's moving over, and the reset pin, which my cursor's moving over. So you just have to touch those at the same time with the paperclip or whatever else you're using, and you might have to hold it for a second, and that will turn it back into DFU mode. So when you're doing this, the process that you're going to want to follow specifically is plug in whichever side your master side of the keyboard is going to be. So for most people, that's the left side. So once you've built your keyboard, plug in the left side microcontroller, so this USB-C port, to your computer, whatever you're using for this, and open up your QMK Toolbox app that you've now downloaded. So just plug it all in, open up this app. Now, at this point, you're going to put it into DFU mode like we discussed and how to do that before. So everything's plugged in, throw it into DFU mode. If you've already done it, that's fine. Do it again just to kind of test it. And a yellow line of text should pop up here on the QMK Toolbox app that will say, like DFU mode engaged or something along those lines. I don't have my ferris-sweep on me, so you just have to imagine it there, but it should pop up. If it doesn't, you haven't put it into DFU mode. That text has to pop up. So if it doesn't, you have a problem. Now, before you flash this software onto here, which I'll show you how to do in a second, you're going to want to set the handedness of your keyboard. This is not in the build guide, in the Keybs for All build guide, but you still need to do this. If you don't do it, it'll mess up your controller. And I did this to mine. I had to work through it, problem solve it. It took me forever to figure out. But basically, once you've turned into DFU mode here, you come up to the tools, and this will be selectable. This EEPROM slot will be selectable. Click that, and if you're plugged into the left half of your split keyboard, set the handedness to left, and if you're plugged into the right for more steps down the road, set it to right. But you need to do this first. So set first DFU mode. 2, set left-handedness. Now that you've set left-handedness on this, we can go ahead and flash the keyboard. So how you're going to do that, with your hex file that you downloaded earlier from QMK Configurator, drag and drop that hex file up here into the local file. So make sure that's selected there. And then you have to select the proper category up here for your microcontroller. This tells the QMK Toolbox app which microcontroller it's downloading this software, it's flashing this software onto. This is really important, don't mess this up. If you have an Elite C, it is this line of text that you want to select here. If you have a different microcontroller, you're going to have to go look up which one's specific to your microcontroller. Sorry, I don't know the other ones, but this is the Elite C one here. So make sure that's selected, make sure you have your file here, and make sure there's the yellow line of text that's pop up saying you're in DFU mode and you've set the handedness. Now that you've done all that, it's super easy. Just press the flash button here. It will flash or download that software onto your keyboard. So congrats, you're done with the left side of that now. So you need to do the same thing, just unplug once it's done flashing. It'll take a few seconds. Unplug it, plug in the right side, set the handedness, make sure this is correct, make sure your file is correct. You can use the same file for both sides. It's not a 2-file thing, just one file. And then flash the right side. So now you've flashed both sides, you've set the handedness, it should be good to go, and you can just open up a new tab or wherever and start typing, and it should work for you. So that is how you set the master side, set the handedness, and flash this onto your board. So that's how you get this board running from just the basic, you've built it, to now you can use it with software. If there's any questions that you have or anything that I haven't answered in this video, feel free to comment it down below. I'll try and keep an eye on this and maybe on a Reddit post or something. The other thing, if you haven't already joined it, you probably want to join the Low Profile Keyboard Discord. There's a lot of helpful people in there. Also on Reddit, if you post, normally people get back to you in a response. I'll try and keep an eye on this video to see if there's anything I didn't cover or covered incorrectly. And if you know for a fact there's something I covered incorrectly, please comment it below for others to see. So now you should be able to use your keyboard freely, and you know how to customize it further with layers and stuff like that if you want to. So enjoy. Hope this helped.